Thanks for staying with us. This is still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. As a prompt for our conversation on improving government-labor relations, let's take this background report by Abdusalam Jibril.
In over 80 countries around the world, workers will be holding marches on this day to promote the rights of working-class people and to protect them from exploitation. Also known as International Labour Day, May Day, or Workers' Day, is a day set aside to encourage collective efforts to improve working and living conditions for all workers, empower them to understand and assert their rights, and protect them from exploitation. Going down memory lane, the origin of Labor Day can be traced back to the late 19th century when workers across the globe began demanding better working conditions, fair wages, and shorter working hours. With approximately 60 million people employed in Nigeria as of 2022, May 1st is also a day set aside to commemorate workers across the country. It is a day Nigerian workers can highlight some challenges they face, which some experts say include the issue of low wages. They insist many workers are often paid low wages, which is below the minimum wage, making it difficult for them to afford basic necessities such as food, housing, and healthcare. Recall that in 2019, the government increased the minimum wage from 18,000 naira to 30,000 naira per month, and talks are ongoing between organized labor and the government for another increment in light of current realities. In addition, the experts also say Nigerian workers face long work hours in some organizations, reportedly working for up to 12 hours a day without overtime pay. This leaves them with little time for rest and leisure, which can have negative impact on their health and well-being. Poor working conditions, lack of access to societal protection schemes such as health insurance and pension are also challenges workers in Nigeria face. As Nigeria joins the rest of the world to celebrate the 2024 International Workers' Day, with this year's theme focusing on ensuring safety and health at work in a changing climate, how can workers' welfare be improved with the current economic hardship across the country? There are calls on the government to put the interests of workers first in its policies and programs. How much would these help in mitigating the challenges workers face? This will form the crux of discussions as guests speak to the welfare of Nigerian workers across the country shortly.
All right, that was our correspondent Abdul Salam Jibril giving us a background report to our conversation. And once again, we are looking at improving government-labor relations. Comrade Issa Aremu is DG, CEO, Michael Imodo, National Institute of Labor Studies, and he joins us live here in the studio, and it's always a pleasure to have him clarify issues on labor matters. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, clear.
And happy Workers' Day.
Well, to you, I want to say happy Workers' Day to all your viewers. Clear.
All right. We also have Comrade Tommy Etim, and he's the first Deputy President, Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, National President, Association of Senior Civil Servants of Nigeria. And we're glad to have him with us this morning. Thank you very much, Comrade Okon.
Thank you very much, and happy Workers' Day.
Okay, joining us here also in the studio is Dr. Makolo Hassan. He is the National President, Non-Academic Staff Union of Educational and Associated Institutions, NASU. You are welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, and happy Workers' Day.
Happy Workers' Day to you too. Okay, let's kickstart our conversation this morning. And I want to start with Comrade Tommy Etim Okon, who is the Deputy President, Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Let's just find out, as a Nigerian worker, what would you say? How's your feeling like today? How do you feel today?
Well, I want to say that in a mixed feeling, I'm happy, and in the other feeling, I'm sad. Sad in the sense that it is not yet uhuru for Nigerian workers. The Nigerian workers are going through serious socioeconomic challenges, and they are going through a very harsh working conditions, and are also going through an unsecured work environment because of the state of insecurity in the land, and because of the inability of Nigerian workers to meet the demand at home. And I'm also happy in the sense that today we are gathered to celebrate all the efforts the Nigerian workers have put in place. Look at you now in the studio. Maybe you've been here since 5 o'clock trying to make sure that the people are informed to see what they are doing. But when you look at the commensurate pay, you cannot compare. So no purchasing power. So these are fundamental issues that makes us feel happy and make us also feel sad relatively. But in all, we want to salute the dexterity and the total commitment of the Nigerian workers to ensure that they are very productive, even though they work under a very harsh socioeconomic environment.
Okay, I also would like to toe the line by bringing in Dr. Makolo Hassan, a National President, Non-Academic Staff Union of Educational and Associated Institutions, NASU. 43 years ago, Nigeria workers, had their inaugural Workers' Day celebration. That was in 1981. And some of the basic, demands then included, of course, fair wage, better working conditions, and improved labor government relations and all that. These are still some of the issues that we hear today. What, from your own evaluation, would you think are some of the present, issues? Have they changed from what it was in 1981?
Yes, thank you very much. And they first started even in Kano in 1980. Then it became a public holiday in Nigeria in 1981. Now, if we look at where we are coming from, I remember that in 1981, workers taking as low as 100 naira will be able to pay for accommodation, because at that time you pay on monthly basis. You can pay for accommodation, feed yourself, you still have little reserve at the end of the month. 100 naira. Now today we are talking of 30 naira as minimum wage. You cannot buy one bag of rice.
30,000 naira.
You can't buy one bag of rice. And we have workers with family who are supposed to pay school fees, who are supposed to take the children to hospital. Then the irony is, how do they cope? Now, even workers who are senior staff who are taking 100 and something, as we speak now, you cannot fuel your car for 2 weeks. Then how do we go? So we are going from fry pan to fire, as we say in the kitchen. That even what we are clamoring now as minimum wage of 615, it will come to a time that it will be swallowed by the economic conditions. Because by the time Labour and TUC were looking at 216, the electricity tariff was still friendly. Now it has gone up. So, and we are battling with the effect of fuel increase. We've not come out of that. We are now going into electricity. And all these things will affect every segment of our lives. It will affect the businesses. And so we are not there, and we are going into a worse situation. And I want to believe that people who work for the government, people who advise the government on economic matters, should do it with sincere heart, not because it favors you. There are people who do not buy this food, who go to market to buy. I don't know whether did you hear buy. Because you go to some level, government supplies you free. So even if they say the minimum wage should be 100,000, these workers are making noise enough. It cannot be enough. So this is where we are. We have a long way to go, except we change.
Thank you very much. We have a long way to go, except we change. Comrade Isaremu, you've been there before. You've been part of the struggle, and you are still, I believe you are still part of the struggle, and you know where the issues pinches, and what exactly is the situation like for a Nigerian worker? What is, I mean, from past experience to now, give us a brief.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy that you restore my status as a comrade. Because
Comrade Buddha.
Dr.
He was there.
Dr. Hassan nearly disowned me as a comrade. Well, you know, let me emphasize here, I'm a comrade DG.
Okay, comrade DG.
Was a comrade, always a comrade. But on a serious note, on behalf of my honorable minister, the supervisory minister for the Ministry of Labour, Dr. Nkiru Yodiocha, as well as the management and staff of Michael Imodu National Institute for Labour Studies. You can see my background. Michael Imodu, my institute is named after #1 Labour man who actually struggled for living and minimum wage over the years. So on behalf of my minister and our management, I would like to, join my comrades to say Happy May Day, and of course to all of you. And I want to thank NTA for giving the platform for us to reflect on the state of the workforce. I think my two presidents have said it all, that this is a good day for us to reflect on the plight of the working men and women in this country. I think the greatest resource of any country is the human resource. Often we always talk of oil and gas, minerals, money, capital, but none of these resources can be turned to wealth without the working people. So in fact, ideally, every day, and that's it in reality, every day is Workers' Day. I can imagine what it takes if you are not here to sweat every day. We can't have good money in Nigeria. So labor creates wealth, and the wealth of the workers should be the wealth of the nation. Poverty of the workers also, will reflect on the prosperity of the nation. So it's significant that we're marking today. And again, my comrades have, gone on memory lane. This is the 43rd edition of National, May Day. Of course, it also started in 1988. The late governors Remi Abubakar of Kano, as well as Balarabe Musa of Kaduna, under the People Redemption Party. There was once a Nigeria in which politics was based on ideology, passions. They were very committed to decent work, and they declared May Day 1980. Then later on, President Shehu Shagari, was under the NPN, not to be outperformed, decided to make it national. Of course, also based on the demand of the working people, because the first president of NSC, Elijah Sansumanu, is still very well alive, made that demand for it. So I think Nigeria is clear about the need to celebrate labor over the years. But I agree with you that, my comrades, that it's a mixed bag of the plight of the working people, but the beauty of trade union movement is that trade unions do not agonize, they organize to fight. Now we're having negotiation going on now on the new minimum wage. It's the sixth national minimum wage negotiation that is going on. The first one was in 1981, where we had 125 minimum wage, but that was about $250.
Then,
because strong macroeconomic environment, our currency was very strong. I don't know what rate you want to use. If you use $250, you can imagine what it means now. That's close to almost about 250,000, depending on what rate you are using, which means a minimum wage earner as at 1981 earn as much. And then now we are talking of 30,000 minimum wage. But Labour has tried. Later in 1990, it was raised to 200. Then in 2000, when we returned to democracy, it was jacked up to 5,500 national minimum. Minimum wage is legally permissible. Then it moved along that line, 18, 30. So, based on the effort of Labour has done very well to fulfill the mandate of the time. But the more you earn the pay, the more inflation goes up. Currency devaluation, high cost of living. And in recent time, Labour has been more challenged with the twin policy of subsidy removal, the collapse of exchange rate, inflation has gone up, cost of living has also, the inflation officially about 33%, and the wages have not moved along that line. But the beauty of the labour market environment is that Labour is also struggling back. And I want to commend the NSC as well as TUC for the wonderful struggle they've put up. Because the mandate of Labour is to engage in policy contestation. They need to convey the plight of their members, and they've done very well in that respect. Of course, in doing so, they also have policy accommodation. And later on, as we discuss, we can look at some of the facts. I want to commend them for having that agreement of, is it October 2nd?
Yeah.
Yeah, with their 15-point, agreement, very unprecedented. And first presidential wage award, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu promised that 25,000. Later on, Labour insisted it should be 35, and I can tell you that has been paid.
Okay.
Minimum wage negotiation is on. So today is to bring those facts up. Let's look at the gains we have recorded. And there is the first under this administration, and I think it's committed to Renew Hope agenda, which we can now look at how far with the plight of the workers. Once again, happy meeting.
Yes, I like that you are applauding, the efforts of, your SY colleagues, because
that's my colleagues.
You are a DG now. So, yes, you will. It's not clear whether you will toe the same line, that they're towing now. Yes,
on the other side.
Exactly. So it's commendable. You are commending them, but I'm also going to ask you, because I know in your heydays as a very active member of the NLC, you were General Secretary of the National Union of Textiles and Garments and all that. You were very vocal. Quite vocal and active and visible, especially in evaluating, the way and manner in which Labour and government, have addressed issues, and those issues are still, available. They are still with us now. So, from your perspective now, how would you evaluate the way Labour government relations in terms of addressing some of these issues? And because we know that, the only constant thing is change. The environment in which we live will continue to experience change in all spheres, and this will knock on the issues, affecting workers. Workers will continue to make demands. So how would you evaluate the way and manner in which government and Labour have, addressed these issues?
I think, let me put it this way, there has not been dull moment, and first I've told you that Labour has kept to the tradition of representing workers very well. They've been very loud and vocal. But I should also acknowledge that government itself is also alive to the responsibility. And don't forget this, we have a tripartite stakeholders. We have tripartite stakeholders. It also includes employers of Labour. There is, Nigeria is very vibrant. Nigeria Employers Association, consultative association.
When you say alive, what can you put it into context?
No, what I mean.
You say government.
Yeah,
is alive.
What I mean they are alive is that government has also been very responsive within the context of the framework of social dialogue and collective bargaining, and especially President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He's been home and dry with Labour movement even before he became a president. He also has his pedigree. But I also know that immediately the subsidy was removed, I mean, he made it clear that reforms are inevitable. And of course, labor movement were not opposed to reforms. It's how you carry out the reforms. Immediately, subsidy were removed. Of course, prices of fuel went up, and he quickly engaged with labor. And it was that engagement that led to, I was talking of October 2nd agreement. 15-point, very comprehensive, and that agreement, to a large extent, have been implemented. So it's complement to all the parties, that presidential wage award, 35,000 will be paid before the new minimum wage comes. So that's for the federal employees. Then the president went outside the federalism box. He thought as to persuade the governors to also follow suit. And a good number of governors tried to respond. Then there was a promise of the new minimum wage committee, which is on now, and I think my comrades can talk about that. A good number of our members who are negotiating over there. Then the promise of CNG buses. I think there was also commitment to get the refineries done. You can be on and on. But the one I found very useful, even in that agreement, is the agreement item 13, which says that if there are disputes, they will be resolved through the process of collective bargaining. I think there was also a clause that talks of addressing the crisis arising from the universities about their deferred payment. And I think at a point, President came in to also give some waiver, to academic staff union. Of course, non-academic also demanded for their own. And my president is here, this one is a good striker. Together with SANU, they went on strike, and I think they had some agreement along that line. So if you ask me, I would say that government-labor relations, despite the challenges of the economic crisis, of the reforms, there has been a lot of engagement. And we have about 4 strikes, national strike. Even at a point, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu said this could be too many for a young administration. But labor is only know when there's strike. We don't talk about when there is no strike. And Ministry of Labor data shows that there are a lot of negotiation going on, collective bargaining. My president here is a powerful bargainer. He signed agreements every other day. I just had the news this morning that the National Salaries and Wages Commission, has just given circular about improvement in salary for the consolidated, I think about 6 of them, most of them service workers. 6. I mean, most of them in the armed forces and co. They're also workers in uniform. Yeah, of course. But they are not unionized. But labor also makes case for them. They've just approved some improvement in pay for them. 25%, but 30%. Yeah, the one that is even of interest to me is also the case of pensioners. I think they also put it there. For those who are contribution scheme, they approve some scale for them. I mean, those are the silent struggles.
Those on defined pension scheme.
For defined pension scheme. So if you find out there are a lot of negotiations, discussions going on, Minister of Labour will tell you hundreds, if not thousands, of agreements that have been signed in a peaceful way.
This is from your perspective.
Okay.
So we would like
let's hear from but let me wrap up on this part. But we can go furthermore, and I think this is my suggestion quickly, to all the parties. First, the government has to rethink the reform in a way that labor must be taken along as much as possible in formulation of policy as well as implementation, because I mean a lot of ideas could have been put into this reform. There's also what we call just transition in carrying a reform, which means you don't do reform in a big bang. There should be spacing, so that we don't go to and fro and co.
This is for labor. This just transition is for labor. It's for labor.
Even for the government.
Right. Okay. Let's ask Comrade Okon to come into the conversation again, because just recently, about 2-3 days ago, I think the president of TUC announced that there's this agreed unified proposed 615,000 naira as minimum wage for workers in Nigeria. Can you tell us what are the indices considered, to have arrived at this? And have you been able to, do you think this is realistic, going by the situation, the economic situation that we have on ground right now, the inflation and so many other things? Have you put all that, into context before arriving at this particular figure?
Well, thank you very much. Before I come to that, let me also correct an impression. We had the agreement comes October 2nd, 2023. By that extension, it was a fall down of the removal of fuel subsidy, which the issue at stake was how to cushion it, and became an issue of CNG buses, which was expected to be a stopgap in terms of transportation. But as we speak, none is in the street of Abuja. None is in the street of Nigeria anywhere. That would have saved the situation of transportation. Because as a worker, despite the fact that, yes, the federal government has given 35,000 wage award, but that will not translate effective transportation without the buses.
Sorry to cut you in, but what happened to the labor buses? Labor, they used to have buses before in the past. What happened to all their buses?
Well, I think that would be a discussion for another day. We are dealing with this issue of agreement as signed, October 2nd, okay. Which emphasis was on these CNG buses. So we feel that government should walk the talk on that, because one of the issues that always provoked the labor is reneging on agreement. And if you recall that it was until we issued another strike notice that even the 35,000 wage award was paid, and they have only paid it to February, which means we still have outstanding for March and of course April, which is not healthy enough. Taking cognizance of that and the fallout of that, and you look at the cost of living, that's for labor to come up with 615,000 naira. But even at that, there wasn't an increase in tariff of electricity, which as at then it was 66 naira per kilowatts of electricity. All of a sudden it jumps to 225 without stakeholders consultation. I'm happy when Comrade DG said that they need to be that consultation. You can't come up with a policy that affects the workers and you just feel you can do it without, without the workers. And this is also what is happening. Even when Mr. President set up a committee to look at Rosaya's report, and we all cried, you cannot shave our head in absence. Labor has to be included. Suppose you want to scrap these agencies and there will be a lot of jobs. Once there is a job lost, and you feel that our input will not be important, that is already a recipe for industrial unrest. And because we are very responsible, we have called on government to include the labor in the committee. And not only that, the government need to also take into cognizance that cutting costs of governance shouldn't be focused on the civil service. It has to be holistic. You have to also look at the Constitution. There are provisions in the Constitution that need not to even be there. Because where you have opportunity to create an atmosphere of having two ministers in a ministry that does not even work, where you have the permanent secretary, the professional directors, and you are having two ministers, because the Constitution makes that provision that every state should have, you are already creating what we call the power play. And in a right sense of it, it don't supposed to be done. We can reduce it to the barest minimum, taking cognizance that those provisions in the Constitution need to be reviewed. And also in line with even Orasanya's report. Don't also forget these agencies were created by the Act of Parliament. They have to be repealed before you can carry out any exercise. And our insistence of labor inclusion is to ensure that our voice, the voice of the workers, are heard. These are some issues that make the workers feel that we are not protected.
Comrade Okon,
so that 615 is not even enough, going by the recent development.
That's why I asked, Comrade Isaremu, what he thought about, labor and government relation, how in the manner in which labor and government, had gone about resolving these issues. And of course, he mentioned the issue of constant, consultations, dialogue going on, and that things, probably, from, if I just paraphrase what he said, things are much, much better. Discussions are going on, collective bargaining is going on. But from what you say now, it doesn't appear that there's been a paradigm shift in the way and manner that has been done. But please hold on. Wale Smart Oyerinde joins us from Lagos and is Director General, Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. Mr. Oyerinde, thank you very much for being able to join us for this conversation. And quickly, just before we again escalate our conversation back here in the studio, I mean, what do you make of today is Workers' Day. From your perspective, what are we expecting?
Well, thank you for having us, and good morning to the Comrade President. Good morning to Comrade Okon. Good morning to all Nigerian workers and colleagues also in the studio. I think it's a beautiful day, irrespective of the ongoing challenges that we have, irrespective of the issues that has been raised by government, issues raised by workers, and those issues within the context of the reality of all parties, even employers, those issues are valid. The consistent cry by workers for improved welfare, for more consideration is valid. The cry of government concerning resources is also valid, and the complaint of employers concerning a hospitable business environment that will engender creation of prosperity and wealth is also valid. So for us, we just want to commend and congratulate all Nigerian workers. Come to think of it, I'm also a worker. To congratulate all of us for making it to another Workers' Day. It has been challenging. It has been very difficult in the last few years. Without going political, but to say there is hope in the horizon. As Comrade Isa Aremo have said, we urge government, as they continue to deepen the reforms, those reforms should be implemented with human face. Because if somebody is already in an emergency and he needs oxygen, you have to do what is needful as quickly as possible to stabilize him rather than compound his situation. They've mentioned the issue of the recent electricity tariff, a bit of contradiction that we have seen that tends to negate the desire of this government to make things easier, not only for workers, but also for employers. So we want to commend Nigerian workers. We appreciate what they've contributed. We view them strongly, not as commodity, as the ILO have said, but we see them as humans and a key factor in the production and the creation of wealth. So for us, it's a good day to celebrate. It's a good day to calm down and actually breathe and celebrate the little that we have achieved within the context of the challenging environment that we are all operating in.
Thank you very much, Wale Oyerinde, for your opening remarks there. Let's come back to the studio now, and let's get Dr. Hassan's view on this issue between the government and workers' relation. There seems to be this issue of trust, which has been raised now, because from what the comrade said, that most of the time when government is making policies or trying to make reforms, the labor is not carried along. So how do we begin to improve the communication, between labor and government to prevent all these misunderstandings and strike? And how can this issue of trust, be solved?
Yes, thank you. I want to start this way. Comrade DG said discussions are ongoing on minimum wage. It is interesting to know that minimum wage, the old one, terminated yesterday. By today, May, we are supposed to have announced this is the new minimum wage, because it is an act.
By law. Right?
By law. It has terminated yesterday. And the yearnings and aspiration of labor was that at least before today, the discussions would have been concluded. Workers that come to celebrate will go back home with the good news. But the discussion is now kept in the limbo because labor has been expecting, waiting. The government is not calling for further meetings. So we don't know what they want to put on the table before next meeting. So if you do that, the workers will not trust you. Because we started in good faith, fire brigade, memorandum of action signed, nothing happens. Secondly, the issue of trust. Comrade DG made mention, he dabbled into my own territory, which is the university. We were on strike. Academic staff, non-teaching staff, SANU, NASU, NAT. And in the case of NASU and NAT, we have a marriage of convenience because we have what we call JAC. We held several meetings with the then Minister of Labor, and later on, the former Minister of Education called us. Comrades, come, let's do this thing in-house. What is the problem? We agreed, and we signed memorandum of action that all the grievances will be addressed, and nobody will be victimized. So when the issue of no work, no pay came, we told them ours should be different. Because you say nobody should be victimized. If you withhold our salary, that is victimization.
Serious one.
We were on that until the current president, gave a waiver that everybody should be paid. That waiver was singled out and paid the academic staff and left the other staff. And when we pressed further again, they said, okay, no problem. The government has accepted to pay us. You will see alert very soon. As we are talking now, no alert. And the only language our members can understand is when they hear Bagam, they say you are doing well. So they felt we are not, sometimes they will tell you government has reached out to you. You are not working well. We have avalanche of agreement. Sometimes they call it memorandum of understanding. They say memorandum of action, and no action is going on. So if I sign document with you and you refuse to play your own part, how will I rely on you tomorrow or trust you tomorrow to sign any further agreement? Not until government begin to sign agreement and implement. Then it means that workers will not have courage on the government. Especially now you are in government, workers will present their demand. These are the issues. And it might lead to industrial crisis. You sit in the comfort of your office, you will not say anything. Notice will be given of strike, you will not say anything. Until strike commence, overnight you say, come and let's talk. Let us sign agreement. And from your heart, I know that you know, let's just sign so that they can call off. After calling off, nothing is done. So if this continue, the trust will not be there. That is where we are.
Did you said something earlier on, that labor is known when there is strike. And that struck me. I don't know, is that supposed to be complimentary?
When the boss should be known every
No.
day.
Yes, when the
No, that is exactly the angle I am hitting now. Labor is known, but you are not termed to be effective until when you are on strike. I tell people that cares to know that even in the face of war, you come to table to settle. But why will you enjoy? Maybe the government will enjoy it, say, yeah, workers are doing well. Until you say, we'll not go grill, say, come, let us sign something. The government can on their own, call workers. What are the issues on ground? Like we told the current Minister of Education, he set up now a periodical meetings with workers in the education sector. You don't wait until there are issues. You can preempt. If you do that, the labor themselves will not even have any right to go on strike.
Yeah.
Because there will be the agitations will be less.
Comrade Aremu, I mean,
Yes.
you are on the other side now.
I'm not. There's only one side.
Because this issue of trust is so vital.
Yeah, I know.
And there is need for us to build trust and to maintain trust between government and labor. And now that you have seen, it's like you have seen both sides now. What can be done to build trust and to maintain trust?
Okay, but it's a recurring theme. I want to say there's only one side, the side of the working people. I'm a worker myself.
And I would also like you to explain further that statement which you made, because I know you made it from the other side.
Yeah.
Labor is not is only known when there is strike. Yes.
But let me also greet my other DG, not Comrade DG, the DG of NECA. From Lagos, and maybe President should know that DGs have grades. The one of NECA lives on maximum wage and profit. I live on minimum pay, like any one of us. So, but back to the point you raised. In fact, interestingly, the statement I made is a quotable quote of Michael Imodu. And he did that in the 30s, 40s. The only language the British employers understood that time was strike. I know it led a lot of strikes, but we're now in Nigeria after 64 years of independence. And after this robust engagement between labor and government over the years, we shouldn't know labor only when they go on strike. Labor should be valued every day. Labor is the most important factor of development. If you go to America, immediately after you leave the White House, close to it is Department of Labor. The key to drive development is workforce, so motivate them, cultivate them, take them along the line. But pointedly, how can we improve on this? It's a social dialogue. Collective bargaining assumes that all the parties will think of each other's interest. So government, let me start with the government, should be able to wear the cap of the working people. Labor doesn't have to make noise to know, for government to know that this pay that we have in the both in the public and private sector cannot take workers home. And that what we have today is what I can call working poor. Workers who are poor on account of working. Unlike in the past, once you get a job, it's a race out of poverty. But now it's the other way around, due to high level of inflation, high cost of living, and as has been said, multiple increases in services, just as we are witnessing in the energy sector. Hike in tariff without even availability of energy. So that's important. And secondly, so government has to think along that line. And as Comrade Oko said, it's a national law, it's a law, act of parliament, that minimum wage has terminal date. So you don't really need labor to push before you know that we must quickly get negotiation on board. Am I communicating?
Yeah.
And we must be able to conclude on time. Because even if you pay the money, what you can't control is high prices. So delay payment of salary is also not really healthy, or delay payment of any agreement. So again, that I think government should be able to take that on. And interestingly, this President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is very clear. And I listened to your newspaper review. He's made this speech last year. He's made this statement. He said, "I'm not only committed to minimum wage, but living a wage." Not only that, he said it's good economics, and it's good. What you pay workers, they are meant to buy goods and services. So the only way you can also do economic recovery, pay your working people very well. So I don't think there should be delay in this negotiation. But it's a joint effort. We must also work it together. Then on the part of the organized labor too, we have to also wear the cap. And I know Conrad Adam used to say this when we were in textile in those days, when everything gets breakdown, they will say, "No, Adams, you also have to wear the thinking." Am I communicating? Of the employers, so that we have a way. And I think the the DG of employers to be able to talk more on that. That we must also think, who pays anything that we agree upon, affordability, sustainability, of enterprises. I listened to comrade from Senior Staff Association very well, my very good comrade who talks of a recent report. Fantastic. That shouldn't lead to job losses, downsizing. So we must also factor that way in our thinking, so that to restore the trust you talk about will be based on the fact that all of us think together to make the workplace very safe, very rewarding for not only for the workers, but for the government too. And that's why I say that reform agenda, because this government is committed to reforms very well. And then some of the reforms are important, they are inevitable, but reforms must also be inclusive. Am I communicating that way? Then also, it must also have a just space. It's like you have cataract. Am I communicating? You don't remove it immediately. You have to also have a way to make sure that the highs are, then a conducive atmosphere for the proper surgery. Otherwise, you break the height.
All right.
So,
yes.
that now means that labor could be partners in that development. Comrade President, it's not just about Rosanyo report. For instance, the president has constituted the Presidential Economic Advisory Council. Labor should be there. Business people are there, bankers are there, and these are mostly people who have conflict of interest. Only workers can give you balance with implication for employment. This president is also committed to creating 3 million jobs, digital jobs, mass jobs. In fairness, the government has not retrenched. On the contrary, it's talking about job creation. That could be, labor could be partners, but they can't do so if you push them outside. I know my minister just launched an ambitious 2.5 million jobs, LEAP, Ministry of Labor, but it's not to hear from our side, when we can all hear together. So in that case, we'll be carrying the burden together, in a way that we can really reposition the country within the context of Renew Hope agenda. So the trust will come through direct engagement. Even the presidential committee on, revenue drives. I think there is this one by Taiwo, on tax reforms. I once told the committee, I said, no, only workers pay tax. Clear.
Yeah.
They will pay as you earn. Here you can't have a committee without involving the representative of the workforce.
We have a few minutes to take
I
a break.
think the trust will come with more engagement.
I wanted you to quickly also tell us, because this is where your institute, the institute in which you head, come into play. The leaders of the different unions in the NLC have made their point. You talked about inclusion, and this is the gap in labor-government relations. So, where does the institute?
I think everything we've said boils down to improving knowledge about industrial relations, improving more understanding that labor market is a specialized field. Dr. Hassan have said, so why do you have an agreement that you don't respect? There's a knowledge gap. You don't go to an agreement that you cannot enforce. Or you could also have an agreement which you can have a provision for what you call reopener clause, to say that in case of any emergency, we'll return back to discuss. So from day one, everybody is on board. It's a technical fit, and that requires now regular training, regular education. And that's what our institute is meant for. It's Labor Institute. It has been there since 1983, so we've been promoting labor education, but we need to do more for the party. So government officials also need to go back to labor-government relation 101. They must return back to class. Of course, labor too must also return back to, knowledge, because it's a constant dynamic market. We're all members of ILO. We know training goes on every day, so that we know the thinking of government. We must know the reform agenda, because you cannot engage what you don't know. 8-point agenda of the president, there should be direct engagement with organized labor to get it through. And that's why our institute will have to be extremely very relevant. And then we can even have understanding on this reform. 4 or 5 years, understanding. You do this, in return for industrial peace, there will be, proper understanding. So I think we can't, understate the need for capacity training, but you also know the labor market institutions have to be well financed, have to be well resourced. When you have an institute that is there for
that's
envelope
another
budget,
topic for discussion
envelope
for
budget,
for another
and then
day.
you have to impart on
The funding of
73
the
million
institute.
workers. Even the Ministry of Labour is also not well funded.
The issue of funding cuts across.
I know, including
all the
NTA
sectors.
is for all of us.
But institutes and agencies must also be responsive to their mandates.
No, it's clear.
Yes,
That's
because
right.
if that is done, the issue of trust that you raised, both parties
Absolutely.
will understand their respective roles and then come together.
Okay, we'll take a break. The conversation will continue after the break. Just stay with us. Yeah, you're welcome back. We're still on to the labor government relations on Good Morning Nigeria. And we still have our guest in the studio. But we'd like to go to our guest in Lagos. That is Wale Smart Oyerinde, the Director General, Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. Wale, I wanted to speak on this issue of, how do you begin to motivate, and cultivate labor, in a better way, for better, production efficiency? Because a lot of things has been spoken here by the comrades in the studio, especially concerning the labor-government relations and the issue of trust.
In the private sector, I must say, the narration is a bit different, and I think that speaks to the level of professionalism that exists to a large extent in the private sector. The private sector doesn't draw allocation, it doesn't draw subvention from government. So efficiency and effectiveness of resource control, effectiveness and efficiency in managing human resources is quite paramount for the private sector. So the imperative to maintain peace so that production can go on and capital is not lost is quite important for the private sector. And that is why we have come up with definitive steps, in engaging labor in the private sector perspective. The level of trust, as has been mentioned, in the private sector is quite commendable. The level of openness and our willingness to engage is also quite commendable in the private sector. And over time, it has trickled down to building trust and deepening engagement and collaboration between labor in the private sector, much more than what we have seen in the public sector. And for us, really, as a Comrade Saremo have said, I think if a missing link, and we have to address it fundamentally, if not, we'll be building structures on sand, is the need for us to carry out a deep and holistic reforms of our whole industrial relations system. As he has said, this ecosystem is professionally driven. It's a professional environment. Social dialogue is not just a concept. Tripartism is not just a concept. Good faith is not just a concept. They are realities. If you don't understand them, then you play with them as if they are just words that you can throw around negotiation table. They are not. So we need to do a thorough reforms of the industrial relation process and then go back to the drawing board within the context of labor and employer education. A lot of things we have seen in recent past, a lot of, with due respect to our colleagues in labor, a lot of the strike we have seen, because it's quite important to us, because those strikes, they basically disrupt the flow of production. And if they have issues with government, sometimes we wonder why the private sector should bear the brunt. Because for us, it's double jeopardy. Is the private sector suffering from the issue of increase in power? Yes, we are. Are we suffering from the issue of infrastructure? Yes, we are. Are we suffering from the issue of multiplicity of taxes? Before Taiwo Oyedele Committee came on board, the private sector is paying over 60 different taxes and levies across the 3 tiers of government. Are we suffering that? Yes, we are. So when there is disruption in the flow of production, the private sector suffers because the loan you have collected as an enterprise to run your business, the interest on those loans, they don't go on strike. The bank will not say because of strike, because of work stoppage, then we give you some buffer not to pay. Those things are the things that causes a lot of disruption for the private sector. So we have modeled a pattern of engagement that is working, and that we think the government, the public sector can also copy. If you remember last year when the president came up and removed the fuel subsidy, even before the federal government came up with its own wage award, the private sector has taken the bull by the horn. We have organizations that have that increased wages. We had businesses that came up with the hybrid work. We had businesses that deliberately start supporting their workers with products, coming up with different models of support to make sure that workers are motivated and workers remain productive. That is the innovation that the private sector is bringing on board, and we just hope the public sector, the federal government and the state government, and also the local government, will take a cue from the private sector and do what is needful. Are we challenged? Definitely we are challenged. Is the economy out of the woods? Basically, the economy is not out of the woods. So all of us, within the context of our realities, must sit down and understand each person's story. As Comrade Aremu said, Labour must be able to put itself in the shoe of government. It must be able to put itself in the shoe of the private sector employers. The employers must be able to put itself in the shoes of Labour, put itself in the shoes of government, and government also, being the sovereign, must be able to look at what exactly are the issues that Labour has, what exactly are the complaints that the employers have, and we must look at those issues, all of us together as tripartite, holistically and dispassionately, and with element of good faith, which without it, you cannot achieve much. Once you bring all those to the table and soak all this in good faith and candid conversation, I think there's a path towards industrial harmony for this country. There's a path towards growth, and there's a path towards inclusion that we've mentioned earlier.
Yerinde, I still want to remain with you. I'm sure you're aware of the common saying that once there is life, there is hope, and usually we congratulate ourselves once we are alive. But you said congratulations, to Nigerian workers, and congratulations in that context would, of course, be used to celebrate either an achievement or, any kind of fortune. But if you consider that Nigerian workers have had to, contend with poor access to healthcare, safety in the workplace, they've also had to contend with inclusion, gender-based discrimination within the workplace, gender inclusion within the workplace. Apart from the economic, dynamics that are playing out at the moment, one would think that your congratulations probably will be out of place.
The fact that you are alive to witness another May Day, it's enough reason to celebrate. That is one. Now, if you are in our own position as employers, where in the last 1 year, close to 100 companies have closed shop. It's like a father that lost 100 children within 1 year. In the last 1 week, one of our members also, a multinational, has also come up to say they are reviewing their operational model in Nigeria, which means basically that they are reducing, because of the so many issues, they are reducing their presence, which we hope will not lead to they are also leaving the country. They are also divesting. Now, it is a different context if a father loses 100 children within 1 year. And if a father has 100 children, they are still breathing, they are still alive, there is hope for them, as you mentioned. It's a different context. So for us, there is so many reasons to celebrate. We are not where we plan to be or where we hope to be, but definitely we are not where we used to be in the context of the economy. Because everything, the healthcare you mentioned, infrastructure you mentioned, everything rests on the economy. And you agree with me, the economy has witnessed a bit of bashing in time past. And without pointing fingers, a lot still depends on the government. A lot still depends on the government to make sure that they drag, in collaboration with all stakeholders, drag the economy out of the woods. Because without the economy working, all the conversation about welfare, about wages, about business or survival will be a mirage. Because everything rests on an economy that is working, an economy that is thriving, because that is the tripod in which every other person, each one of us stands. And the ILO convention, even on minimum wage that we have mentioned, a key factor in determining minimum wage is the economic factors. So if the economy is not right, hardly will you find any other thing right.
Okay, I just before, I know Demola wants to ask a question. I still just quickly, before we come back to the studio. Again, a thriving economy would also rest on functional workforce, both in the public service, and civil service, and indeed the public service. And recently, one of the measures introduced, to ensure accountability and transparency, within the workforce, within the public service, is it's called promotion management, system. And I'm wondering what you think can be done to ensure that this new system works effectively and that the aim is achieved.
I wouldn't know how exactly it works in the public sector, but I think there's a lot to copy in the private sector. Whatever promotional system you put in place, there are two variables that you must consider. One, the process must be transparent. It must be devoid of nepotism. Every employee, every worker must know this is the process leading to my promotion. It must not be ambiguous. And that is what operates in the private sector. The moment it is ambiguous, the moment the tendency to manipulate that process is high, you will have lost the trust, you will have lost the critical element on it. So what I will advise is the federal government can do well to glean from what is happening in the private sector, make the process definitive, make it clear to everybody, make it unambiguous and devoid of nepotism. That way, the confidence of an average worker to know, look, if I do this, if I contribute, my contributions will be acknowledged, and my contributions will be rewarded, either in financial terms or either in promotional terms, either horizontal promotion or vertical promotion. Those are the critical elements that happen in the private sector, and we think those are the things that the public sector can also glean from.
Mr. Wale Oyorinde, for your contribution there. Yesterday we had a meeting in NTA. We call it what did you call it now? It's
the promotion management system.
Yeah, promotion management system.
Performance management
system.
Precisely.
Yes,
PMS.
Performance management system. And it's just the same discussion that we discussed, that we are discussing now. Let me come back to the TUC now. Comrade, the issue of, a lot of people have talked about, we're talking about the government, labor, relations and all that. Do you think that this calls for a reform in labor laws, because and regulations in order to improve, government workers relationship? Because a lot of people said without the reform, without the law, the act being strengthened, we'll still continue to see these challenges?
Well, that is just on the one hand. Like the DG said, there's need to look at industrial relation policies, and make it work. The issue of labor laws is unfortunate that Nigeria is still trading the part of this since 2005. I had a deep knowledge of it, and I can say it authoritatively. Then the ILO came to our aid by giving us technical task team to look at the laws, and we worked through the National Labour Advisory Council in line with the tripartite to see how we can look at the obsolete, because the series of unfair labor practices we see in the country is as a result of these gaps. And I'm happy the DG, Michael Imodu, is here also. You understand very deep. You cannot operate and think, outside the box where you have obsolete labor law, especially with with the new development in labor administrations. Let's look at the world of work, what is expected, the artificial intelligence and the rest of things, telework and outsourcing, taking the place of casualization and all this stuff. For that confident building, the law has to, be reviewed, to take its right of place. But also, the government should not see labor as a parallel government or an opposition government. The most reform that failed is as a result of this non-inclusion. And when you look at the new, what we are now looking at from the perspective of involvement, where you have all the inclusiveness, taking into cognition the pillars of decent work, which has to look at the job creation, has to look at the workers' right, has to look at social protection and also social dialogue, which is fundamental. And if labor is kept aside, coming to look at it, the reform and so on, then you want to only involve labor when there are crises, when that you push them to the wall, there's going to be a rebound. And like the DG said, the all sectors must suffer. It's a must, because you cannot beat us or beat a child and you say we cannot cry. And when we cry, the neighbor must hear us. And because the neighbor must hear us, whether the neighbor wants to sleep or not, he has to wake up. He has to wake up. So that is the truth about it. We have the confidence that this ninth assembly can take a look at the laws again. We are told that the law is already with the legal drafters in the Ministry of Justice, but it shouldn't be so. Take 13 years ago, 2005, is almost 18 years, if not more, till now. We are still battling to get the law reviewed. It shouldn't be so. It's wrong. And our industrial relation policies, if at all we have, need to also be looked at very critically. Because this trust deficit is as a result of all these gaps. Once these things are strengthened, and like the DG said, the Michael Imodu National Institute for Labor Study has to be strengthened. We talk about funding. I agree with him, because you see, you cannot build capacity of people who have diverse experience. Most labor leaders are well trained. You can't compare us with any management. I can beat myself to tell you. What we know, most management don't know. Forget about the fact that we are just like Rasta saving the public. But we have a deep content that when the time you want to get the best of us, put us in the committee and you see the workability.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interject, because we just have a few minutes before we come back to you. But I'd like you to explain to us, because if we don't do this, we would not have done our job today. The new salary increase, 25% and 35%, what does that amount to for, the different personnel involved within the different salary structures? Specifically for Compass.
Yeah, I even want to correct the impression. Before I was coming to the studio, a lot of call, why should government increase salary without consultation? I just want the workers to know that this is not national minimum wage. This has been in existence, and other enjoying the companies have, except for the 6 which the circular have highlighted. So it's also a plus for the workers. Let me say a thank you to the government of
President Tinubu.
President Tinubu in that regard. That will also boost the minimum wage when it comes into it. And I also want to.
What does that amount to in real terms?
Well, the template is there. They have already the spreadsheet is there for level 1 to 6, for level 1 to 15. The template's very clear about that. I'm not handy with it now, but it's in the public domain. When you look at that, you see what one is 25% and 30%. Which for those companies, the 6 companies which has played out, and he also cut across even the paramilitary. Even those who doesn't have union, but when we cry out, it also affects them. I want to commend government on that, and like you talk about the performance management, let me use this opportunity to also commend the head of service of the federation chief. Done well on that. You find out that the upper form was abused, where you don't come to work and all of a sudden you feel and say they mark me A, and so it's no longer so. You are rated on your performance. And we have also carried out education to also inform our members, especially the union leaders in all the unit. If you don't have schedule of duty, you scheme yourself out, because it is the schedule of duty that will be able to rate your performances, whether you are doing well or not. So it's a wonderful thing. Yes, it came from the private sector, but the public sector, just like we are going into computer-based tests in promotion, it also helps. He makes people to think a lot, because we cannot live from the past or continue to do the same kind of thing and expect different results. So definitely, I think it's worldwide. But in all, they must create the enabling environment for productivity to strive. Because if you want me to be computer literate, you must provide all this, and the government is clamoring for paperless public service with the bureaucracy or not. So we need to tinker with some phrases like "I am directed," because that also limits your ingenuity. So we need to tinker with that so that we can have 21st century civil service that is driven by knowledge, driven by ideology, driven by innovation, driven by creativity. These are things. And once we are well paid on this, honestly speaking, you'll see the best, because you cannot put in the best when the home front is hungry. A brat of bread now is 1,800, and you are telling me that my children cannot eat bread because the cost of bread is so. So government need to look at the living wage and see to it that workers are well taken care of in terms of transportation, in terms of housing, in terms of food, and in terms of clothing. By so doing, definitely the best of workers will come into force.
Well, thank you, Comrade Oko. I want to ask you this question, Dr. Hassan, before we round up. The issue of palliatives, a lot of people have argued against it, that by now we should have moved away from this issue of palliatives, where if we are well paid, the workers are well paid and remunerated, this issue of palliative, what's your take on it?
Thank you so much. The question is, what is palliative? And who are those enjoying the palliatives? Because the palliative that I know on the side of workers should be that of 35,000, which was a kind of award. And we have taken it. The understanding was that while that is on, before the end of it, the minimum wage would have come into place. Now, that has been stopped. Our minimum wage is still hanging. And even some few local government, even in Nasarawa here, I heard at a time, they brought one palliative, and I hope a student or two lost their lives because they don't have anything serious there, and people have to scramble for it. Then you go to some areas, after 18 billions of naira, they'll just carry a small vehicle and go to the market side, and people will loot. And they will tell you that, yes, we have given out palliative. I saw some, they go to the market square and stop motor. They say people didn't allow them to pass. I'm
sorry, I have to stop you for just one 60 seconds last input from the DJ.
Well, I think, it's always said, that tells you the power of social dialogue. We are reasoning together. And now that you have made me to be from government, you can see that we are reasoning together. But what I want to say clear is that there's something we shouldn't take for granted. You know, these discussions we're having, celebration we are doing today, it's a product of democratic process.
Yes, we don't,
You know,
we don't,
and
we don't
it's
want
important that, you know, we have to say this because it's only democracy that allows for freedom of association, freedom to assemble.
This time is not.
Since we started marking this day, the 2 occasions we couldn't do so was under the military and possibly during COVID. You know, so, and this anniversary of May Day is taking place at the time Nigeria is marking 25 years of uninterrupted democracy. So it's also celebration of democracy in larger society and in the workplace. Thank you very much.
Well, that's good.
All right.
We're celebrating democracy, uninterrupted democracy, which
And at
is
the
highly
workplace.
commendable. So we should continue in that light. Okay.
All right, Comrade Issa Aremo, DG CEO, Michael Dimodu, National Institute of Labour Studies. Thank you very much for your contribution. Let me also appreciate Comrade Okon, First Deputy President, TUC, and Dr. Makoto Hassan, National President, Non-Academic Staff Union of Educational and Associated Institutions. NASU, thank you. And of course, Wale Smart Oyenride, Director General of NECA. Many thanks to you for your contributions to Good Morning Nigeria today. All right, and that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. We'll be back same time tomorrow. I'll see you then. I am Claire Adina Abdul-Razak. Happy May Day.
And I'm Ademola Adeoye. Thanks for joining us. Happy May Day. Have a wonderful day.